You are listening to the Information Security and OSINT Podcast, episode 45, originally released on February 18th, 2021. As always, I'm your host, Josh Amishav. Today, John Hammond joins us. John is a prolific YouTuber. He has an awesome channel focused on hacking, programming, and capture the flag walkthroughs. My three main takeaways from our conversation were 1, how to get started with CTFs, 2, dealing with burnout, and 3, the methodology he uses when analyzing a new piece of malware. You'll enjoy those two things plus a bunch of other tips along the way. Direct support for this podcast comes from BreachSense. According to the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report, stolen credentials are consistently one of the most common methods used in hacking-related breaches. It's no wonder when the average user recycles the same password across 4 different accounts. BreachSense gives security teams visibility into their clients, employees, and third-party suppliers' breach credentials before criminals exploit them. Go to breachsense.io/contact to apply for a free 7-day trial. And now, here's my conversation with John. John Hammond, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm super happy to be here with you, Josh.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to have you here. So can you tell us a bit about who you are and what do you do?
Sure thing. Well, I guess from the top, hello, hi, my name's John Hammond. I have a cheesy YouTube channel. I guess maybe that's how some folks know me best. I like to produce video content for cybersecurity concepts between capture the flag walkthroughs or security conferences or malware analysis. I hope to hopefully bring out as much education and kind of spread knowledge and information the best way that I can. For my day job, I work over at Huntress, and I do some malware analysis as part of their threat ops team, and that is a ton of fun, and I'm loving it. I guess I have a real big passion for this stuff, and I have a good time.
Great. So how'd you get started?
Oh, actually, so I guess my upbringing is kind of funky. I got started with the U.S. Coast Guard. I kind of got my feet wet over at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. I didn't commission. I didn't end up making it to the finish line, but it was a real big blessing in disguise. I hopped on over to the Department of Defense, where I would teach with their Cyber Training Academy. I was an instructor for the Cyber Threat Emulation course, and that was super cool. I was teaching military personnel and other civilians how to kind of be an operator, like being on keyboard, using offensive Python or PowerShell or command and control frameworks, like being the threat adversary in a simulated, emulated sense. Hopped over to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, where it was meant to be kind of on keyboard, being the operator. And now I bopped over to Huntress, which is providing security for managed service providers and the 99%. And that is wonderful and fantastic. I'm really, really fulfilled in that position, in that role. So
awesome. So why is Python your tool of choice?
Ooh, that's a super good question. Yeah. No, Python is certainly my weapon of choice. It's kind of my knee-jerk reaction whenever I have a task handed in front of me, because personally, it's a hacker's language, right? It's easy to read, it's easy to write. You can like rapidly prototype something. It's super easy to script out anything you'd like with all the other libraries and modules that are accessible to you, whether or not it's using requests to make some kind of internet callbacks to interacting with HTTP, etc. Base64 for simple stuff, Beautiful Soup for extracting and scraping data. There's just so much out there, and it's kind of easy to just bang it out.
So what are your favorite modules that you use in CTFs or in pen testing?
Ooh, so Pwncat obviously is a big one. Requests certainly. Bin ASCII comes up all the time for just doing encoding and decoding, etc. There's certainly more that I could get into. Socket, when it kind of comes down to the wire, doing real stuff. But Pwncat is usually great for a wrapper around that. And we've started to kind of, build our own tools and framework. Katana is kind of one of my babies. And we started to kind of work into Pwncat with a good friend of mine.
So what is Pwncat?
Yeah, Pwncat is meant to be a automated, like, post-exploitation toolkit for when you are working right now against a Linux target. When you have a reverse shell or a bind shell, or you can get remote code execution on a target or on a.
So this would be instead of using like a Metasploit module,
yep.
Metasploit like reverse shell. Okay.
Yes, exactly. It's funny. We started to take some approach to being able to run modules and do things in the same way that Metasploit and Meterpreter might, where you can select one and kind of pull it off the shelf, but all of the staging code comes from the attacker machine rather than having to drop it on the victim and put it on the target. So when you do simple things like stabilizing your shell, okay, to get a full PTY, or to load in linps or whatever enumeration or attempt for privilege escalation, Pwncat will just kind of handle it and do that for you. One of the things that's really, really fun and cool is that the privilege escalation stuff is integrated with as much of the GTFO bins, or like the known privilege escalation vectors that you could use in Linux, and it will sort of recursively look for those through every user that it can see. So if we need to drill down through user Tony, through user Dave, through user Bob, and then finally get to root with some misconfigurations, whether or not it be in sudo or set UID, that's very, very cool to see it kind of drill down and find its own path to root sometimes.
And it automates all that.
Yep. Whenever it can, whatever it has the support for, it knows how to, with as much of the GTFO bins that we've kind of got in place, it will do the very best it can.
Awesome. And what is it? What is Katana?
Oh, Katana is in the similar...
What does Katana mean?
That's a good question. I kind of parallel it to the sword, right? I think it's Japanese, right? That weapon that you end up using. But Katana is meant to be a toolkit for capture the flag players, but it's to honestly solve a lot of the simple, kind of trivial, well-known and classic cookie cutter challenges. Because if you are starting a CTF event and you see, oh, here's a basic ROT13 cipher, or here's a classic RSA, or here's a simple nested steganography thing, Katana is meant to help you remind yourself or do the things that you might otherwise forget to do in the moment. So if you add new modules or you build in new functionality to Katana, it's like, sure, once you've solved a CTF challenge, don't worry or don't think about solving that challenge again in the future, because Katana should be able to do that for you. That's kind of fun. I think that's kind of cool. Again, it is very, very primitive, and whether it'll be able to find something or it won't, there's a threshold and cutoff there. But it's neat. It's always been a fun toy to play with and to see what can I make this thing solve, drill down and find the flag.
Okay, and there's also the CFT Katana, which is kind of it's a very handy checklist. Want to tell us a bit about that?
Oh, certainly, yeah. So CTF Katana was originally a repository that I had in my GitHub that was just a text-based data dump of like my own notes going through exercises and going through training activities. And then I remember I was sitting with Caleb. I was sitting with a good friend of mine at a bar, and we were like, I've always wanted to see if I could have some software or some tool be able to look at data in front of it, kind of somewhat identify what it is, and then like, okay, decode it or work with it to get it to a next layer, to get it to the next stage, and then identify it again and do whatever operations it needs to. Do it again, and recursively try and hunt for the flag, the token that you need to prove that you solved a challenge. So that was the inspiration for Katana, the program, the tool, but it borrowed the same name from that repository and that checklist that I had created a time ago.
Cool. So how did you get involved in CTFs and why do you like them so much?
Sure. That dates back to my Coast Guard Academy time. There was a competition. There was a Cyber Stakes, which I think was the original back when DARPA funded it, and For All Secure, or the guys from the Plaid Parliament of Poning, were putting on a game for all the service academies. And it was super cool. It was the first time that I had ever encountered it. It was the first time that I'd ever got a glimpse of what the Capture the Flag world was. So we went in for the very first time at a live competition, and we made fools of ourselves. We didn't really know what we were doing. We'd never heard of IDA Pro. We were trying to reverse engineer stuff with object dump or OBJ dump. And we had a lot to learn. So I remember we went up to the organizers. I was literally talking face to face with Tyler Nicewander, and he said, like, hey, have you guys heard of ctftime.org? Have you heard of overthewire.org or like Smash the Stack? And all these different training war games. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is a whole world. And I don't know. I really love it because I think it takes education. I think it takes cybersecurity skills and it gamifies it in a way that you're learning, but you're having fun and you're playing a game and you're tinkering and I don't know. I really love that curiosity that comes from it. So that's what's fun for me.
To what degree do they represent like real world scenarios as opposed to being more like puzzles?
That is a super good question and totally a hot debate in some cases, I think. I know there's one side of the spectrum that might say like, oh, capture the flag. That's not real world. It's not applicable to real life. And I think there is some truth to that. If you get to cheeky, guessy steganography challenges, maybe that's not super realistic. Some events and some games I think are certainly tailored and put more in the perspective of like, hey, you're doing a pen test or you're acting as the defense. You're going to be the defender here on the blue team. And I see a ton of games like that between some hack quests that are very red team and offense oriented. OpenSock does incredible stuff to kind of simulate a blue team. I think you can certainly find the capture the flag games that are much more real world and certainly applicable to what you might do for your day job.
You mentioned the educational aspect of CFTs. What are your thoughts on training doing CFTs to come up to speed versus getting a degree versus getting certs?
Okay, that's another good one. So personally, in my opinion, and I'm only one guy, this is just my thought, and I could very well be wrong. um, I think showing and demonstrating someone's competency or their merit, or like, hey, what can you do? What prowess do you have on the keyboard to solve a technical problem? I think that means and is so much more valuable than, hey, the piece of paper with the stamp on it that says you suffered for X amount of years to just get this receipt. And maybe that's the wrong mentality. There is certainly value in having that formal education, that curriculum, because that points you in the right way. But if you don't do that extracurricular, if you don't do some of that self-learning and being self-taught through capture the flag and other activities and exercises, I don't think you have fostered some of the critical thinking and the new determination and perseverance for complex problem solving. So certifications, where they'll put you in this exam environment, if it's hands-on, that's great. If it's a practical, applicable hands-on exam, more power to you. I love those because I think that's a great challenge. But when you're talking to a hiring manager or you're talking to a recruiter and they say, oh, we won't hire you because you don't have X many years of education or you don't have this certificate. Well, like, okay, they don't really deserve you. They don't know what you're capable of.
So let's talk a bit about CFTs, and I guess this would be applicable to anybody starting out, let's say in pen testing. There's, especially in the beginning, there's a tendency to go down rabbit holes, waste a lot of time. In a CFT, how do you stay focused on, how do you avoid that?
That is really tough. Admittedly, I know that's like the hardest growing pain and the stumbling blocks for people just getting started. Truthfully, and I think it is good when you put it in the capture the flag lens, because if you can find some of the more digestible, kind of small, bite-sized problems to solve, you get a little bit more like wind beneath you, and you feel like, hey, I can solve more, I can keep cruising. That helps because that way you aren't completely bogging yourself down and just banging your head against the wall. But when you do go into a rabbit hole, when you are stuck and you don't know how to get past this wall in front of you, personally, I would kind of embrace that rabbit hole for a little bit of time. Like, hey, I'll fall down this road for maybe a half hour or maybe an hour, and then I'll get to a point where like I don't see anything. I've been staring through this text dump, all this enumeration, all this reconnaissance that I've done, and I don't see a path in front of me. At that point, I would kind of take a step back and just survey the scenes one last time. Like, hey, what all have you done so far to get to that point? Is there any stone that you left unchecked? Are there any corners and crevices that might have been in a different location once you got your initial access, or whatever the case may be? I would take just a moment to take a step back. Hey, even if that means just go pace around your apartment, pace around your house for a little bit to like get your mind elsewhere, and then return to it to see what else you can solve. The biggest thing is growing that dedication and perseverance. It's like, hey, don't give up. It's not try harder. It's keep trying.
Yeah, I like that. I like that motto because if you're doing, let's say, a bug bounty, you can very easily go down a rabbit hole and you don't know if anything's there. Like in a
Yes.
CTF, at least you know that there's another stage. But yeah, and like pen tests or bounties, you have no idea. What are I guess the methodologies, the differences in methodologies, or perhaps mental outlook between a CTF and doing a real world engagement like a bounty or pen test?
Ooh, okay. There's a lot in that question to kind of unpack. I've had a lot of conversations with Namsek or Ben Sadigapour, and I might forgive me, Ben, if I ruined your last name there. And he does incredible work in bug bounty. I talk often with Heath Adams, the cyber mentor, and he does phenomenal work in pen testing. Um, and I like to dabble and capture the flag, but I don't consider myself all that great player. There are a thousand people smarter than me, and more so than that. Um, the methodologies I think that are different, and you brought up a really good point when you said in capture the flag, there's something vulnerable. Like there's a problem here that can be abused and taken advantage of. When you're doing a bug bounty and you're performing a pen test, you have no idea. It might not be vulnerable whatsoever, and you could just be wasting your time. And when you do find maybe a little bit of a lead, you see a glistening, something shiny that looks like, oh, that looks like a potential avenue for exploitation and attack. In that world, you're going to be up against much, much more complex security that the company or the business or that organization has probably, at least hopefully, tried to put in place. So whether or not it's a black list or a white list or some complex evasion filtering techniques, et cetera, et cetera. So I've told Namsek, like, dude, I have so much respect for the bug bounty players and those individuals because they've got to craft something so sophisticated that will be able to bypass all those other techniques. And it's all on the hope that there's actually something there. So when I see Namsek do his live reconnaissance, or when I see him trying to enumerate subdomains, well, he's just looking to see what are all the targets that I could potentially focus on, and then let me just kind of drive by each one by one and see, does anything get a hit or does anything get something more worthwhile to look into? That's totally different from capture the flag, because in CTF, you look for patterns and you try to see, hey, what are some of the techniques that I've already known that are really similar to the potential vulnerability in front of me. That was a weird answer, I feel like.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue, and I guess it kind of leads us to the next question, like especially for those who are on the bounty side or the pen testing side, dealing with burnout.
Ooh.
You can knock your head against the wall for hours and hours or weeks.
Yeah.
Till you get just burnt out. How do you deal with that?
Oh man, I've had a lot of thought about burnout because everyone has kind of a different approach to it, or their own understanding or their own take on what to do about burnout and how they handle it. I would reiterate, well, hey, sometimes I just go take a break. Sometimes I go step away, get off keyboard, go outside. Even if it's just, hey, I'm going to play a video game for a half hour, for an hour, I'll do that. I have started to come to a thought where, and I almost want to tweet this, right? But I would say, look, you got to use burnout as a little bit of motivation in a weird way, or like, hey, I don't want the word burnout to even be in your vocabulary. Like, get that out of your head, because you can keep pushing, you can keep going through it, and maybe that's not the right diagnosis for some people. Maybe some people are like, I really can't, I got nothing left in me. In which case I would say, hey, go step away for a little bit, try it again in a day, try it again in a week, but take some time off to relax. And maybe the problem you can see it in a different angle, in a different light later, or whatever you're working on. Although I part of me also leans towards that, hey, you can power through. Don't even think about that word. That B word is a bad word.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how crippling it is. Let's talk a bit about malware analysis, and this is something I don't know very much about. What's your methodology when you see a new piece of malware? How do you dissect it? What are the tools you use? How do you approach that?
Yeah. So We tend to focus in Windows environments and Windows realms, Windows operating system, because that's just the most common, right? Kind of in the industry, in the world, that's what we see most often. And what we see for threat actors or bad guys, hackers that'll create and craft malware, drop it on a victim or a target. Oftentimes, they're wanting to use a language or some technology that is native and inherent to that operating system, right? So they'll live off the land, and that they'll use PowerShell or Visual Basic Script or JScript. We're seeing a lot more C# and compiled like .NET assemblies, either DLLs or executables that can be kind of open and pried and kind of taking a look in because it's a .NET assembly, and you can kind of examine how that code is put together. So the methodology for what we end up doing is looking for kind of those low-hanging fruit scripting languages first. Like if it's PowerShell, or if it's Visual Basic Script, or if it's JScript or HTA, a Microsoft HTML application, those things are still human readable. So if we go through and try and deobfuscate it, because that's the biggest thing, is the threat actors are going to try and make this code completely unintelligible. So it bypasses antivirus, so your EDR solution doesn't pick up on it. It's going to look like a blob of nonsense. So we try and make sense of it by simply running it. Hey, we've got an analysis virtual machine. See what it does. Try to segment different parts and see how it deobfuscates itself so it can actually execute. And that's part of the fun, in all honesty, is just kind of understanding how this works and what interesting techniques did it use to not get caught. And then when we come to more legitimate binaries, well, hey, if it's C#, if it's a .NET thing, we can pop open the thing in DNSpy or ILSpy, some tools to look through those. And if it's going to end up being, hey, a full-fledged EXE where we can't pop it into one of those tools, then we'll probably get into Hopper or Ghidra or IDA and see what we can. Then it's a completely different game because you get into a little bit more hardcore reverse engineering, and that's a much slower crawl than just reading the source in DNSpy or ILSpy. What do you think? Was that?
That was good, and at least a bunch of tools that I can go check out and learn a bit more about. I think you mentioned that there's a new cert, like a OSC something.
OS
about reverse engineering.
So offensive security, one of the kind of big name certifying bodies, has just released OSEP, which is their offensive security experienced penetration tester. And there's OSED, which is their exploit development one in the Windows user mode. The latter is the one that one focuses a bit more on the buffer overflow exploitation as a starting point, and then it talks more about, hey, how do you beat up binaries in a world where you have data execution prevention, or the stack you can't execute off the stack, or how do you deal with ASLR, or that address space layout randomization, where your memory addresses aren't where they're categorically normally going to be, they're random. What do you do in code caves? Can you get an egg hunter to execute shellcode somewhere else? Can you bebop around and make your binary light up like a Christmas tree if you're using some return-oriented programming techniques, et cetera, et cetera? That one, they're just getting started. I think that course starts for me on March 6th because I'm pretty excited about it. I love those things. Like I say, those hands-on, application-based, and practical learning certifications, those are a really fun challenge, and I enjoy those.
Cool. So what advice do you have somebody who wants to get into the CTF world? Where do they start?
So admittedly, there is no, and I'll put a disclaimer, there is no one-size-fits-all answer. It totally depends on how you like to learn. How do you learn best? Videos, reading, etc. Practice. What I tend to tell people is, hey, pick up Linux or just get comfortable in the command line. Just kind of know your way around the file system, know some of the basic commands. And I would redirect people towards overthewire.org. I would tell them to play the Bandit War game to get started on that. And then I think once they're kind of comfortable in Linux, they kind of know their way around the bash shell, or they can do what they need to do running tools and understanding the commands and arguments, etc. Typically, I tell folks, hey, go learn Python. Maybe I'm biased because that's kind of my favorite thing, but I think really that is the hacker's language, and it's so much easier for people to pick it up and learn and do some good stuff with. So with Linux and Python under your belt, then I'd tell people, hey, go play Pico CTF, or kind of one of the well-known training, learning, education, capture the flag competitions. And that's always online. PicoCTF.com is always available. And that, I think, will kind of get your feet wet. That'll whet your appetite. And then once you're, hey, I'm feeling comfortable, I solved a couple challenges on Pico CTF, I'm having fun with this, then I tell people, go to CTF time and start to look for games that you kind of want to practice with, you kind of want to play just to see how you do. If you're interested, you can jump into Try Hack Me. You can look into Hack the Box and get more of that pen testy, red team oriented training. And that super duper helps. It's all a good feedback loop that just expands your skills. That's normally my trajectory, though.
So what are the differences between something like CFT time and Hack the Box?
So CTF time and Hack the Box are different in kind of what they portray the training as. I think when you do an activity or an exercise like one of these, that comes in different flavors, right, or different style. Classic capture the flag is normally a Jeopardy game board, where they'll say, here are a bunch of puzzles or tasks or challenges in different categories like cryptography or binary exploitation or forensics or web, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like a grab bag buffet style assortment of puzzles and problems. That's Jeopardy, right? You can turn that on its head and you could have a boot to root style or a flavor of game. And that's often what you'll see in Hack the Box, or that's often what you'll see in Try Hack Me, where there'll be a dedicated virtual machine, there'll be a dedicated computer that is vulnerable in some way, and you'll spin that thing up and you'll try and exploit it, you'll try and compromise it, you'll try and gain access, escalate your privileges, and root the machine. So a boot to root. That's only a couple pieces of the puzzle. Like, you could get into attack and defense, you could get into hack quest stuff. I think that's sort of an informal name folks use now. But no, there are certainly a couple different flavors of exercises and training like this.
Cool. Okay, so I want to talk a bit about your favorite tools in various categories.
Sure.
Just to run through some to see where what you like to do and where people can focus on. So let's say web app hacking.
Okay.
What are your tools there?
My usual knee-jerk reaction is Nikto, as simple as it sounds. I'll just run a Nikto TAC-H to see if I can find anything interesting. It's just immediate. Let me just look. I'll do GoBuster typically if I can.
Have you tried Fuff?
I have tried Fuff, yeah. And I really like Fuff too. It's actually really good that I can fuzz at any part of the request.
Yeah, so I used to use Nikto a lot, and then I just started like SecLists and Fuff.
Nice.
Kind of get more comprehensive. But okay, sorry, go ahead.
No. I mean, you're totally right. Both of those are excellent. And I'll typically in the situations where, hey, I'm not going to get rate limited, the server is not going to ban me if I send all that many requests, then I would love to be able to brute force and do some directory hunting like that. If I see potential for SQL injection, SQL map is an immediate try. Oftentimes I tend to craft that a little bit more in Python. People tend to ask me like, hey, John, why don't you use Burp Suite, or why don't you use like OWASP Zap or their attack proxy? And honestly, I just say, well, hey, if I'm going to be doing some stuff like that, I'll tend to just do it in Python. Well, which is, I know, weird. Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know. But that way I feel like I can get more finer control and trigger things the way that I'd like.
And you would choose Python over like SQL map, like customizing SQL map requests for like SQL injection?
Yeah, SQL map I know can have like, hey, pass in TAC R for a specific requests file. Or you could modify a cookie, or you could do anything like that. Maybe I'm just a little bit quicker with the request module to load that stuff in rather than digging through the SQL map command line arguments. I just tend to roll, I don't know, open up a text editor and see what I can mess with.
That's interesting. Okay. All right. Mobile. What are your favorite tools there?
I truthfully am not all that sharp on mobile application reversing. I'll run APK tool, right? I'll try and pull everything out of an APK if I can. I'll use JADX or the JADX and the GUI to kind of pull out maybe some other classes. I think there's JD GUI that does a similar thing. And then if I can, hey, I've got, the classes and the Java source code to look through that. And then I'll start the source code analysis and the code audit and review. And that is something I haven't found a next piece to. I don't think there's any real good tool that can help me automate that. It's just a matter of me using my eyes and looking through it. But I will definitely reach for APK tool. I'll definitely reach for JADX and JD GUI. Yeah.
Cool. And for reverse engineering, what are your tools of choice?
For reverse engineering, I'll start super small. I'll do the stupid basic strings, ltrace, strace. I'll run checksec to see what the thing's up against. And then typically, if it's a Windows executable, I'll hop open in Hopper. And if it's going to end up being something that needs a lot more analysis, either a Linux L file or anything else, I'll tend to use Ghidra, in all honesty, these days. I was super excited when Ghidra was released and made available because IDA Pro costs an arm and a leg. And while the decompiler is phenomenal, disassembly is great if you're willing to stare through and look through all those assembly lines, but that can be a little bit harder to follow the logic and kind of see what's happening where. So I maybe I have a crux, and that I really like just looking at the pseudo decompile that you can get out of Ghidra.
Awesome. All right, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh, so I should be pretty easy to find, right? Anyone can cyber stalk me to their heart's content. YouTube is kind of my number one main stage. That's youtube.com/John Hammond 010, just my name and some weird binary at the end. Twitter, I'm on there as _John Hammond. LinkedIn, you can track me down. I have I guess, an Instagram account, but I don't know why. I don't know what cybersecurity following you could get on Instagram. That's a fun joke. But yeah, email, you can reach out. Discord, I have a Discord server. Plenty.
Okay, and Twitter, awesome. All right, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, hey, this has been excellent. I super hope that I offered something worthwhile, something good for you guys. But thanks so much for having me with you.
All right, that's it for this week. If you have any comments or questions, tweet at me at Jamus, JMUSC. And if you got value from this episode, then please share it with a friend. See y'all next week.